when we get into like setting expectations for yourself, like setting expectations for your adherence, the biggest mistake, the biggest issue that I see is that individuals will often go into their post-show period and be like, no, I'm going to be perfect. Like, I want it bad enough. Like, the reality is you're going to mess up. Everyone messes up. Your coach might even mess up. Like, they might send you your post-show plan a little bit late, or they might be a couple days behind in getting back to you. Like, there's going to be things that happen that you don't anticipate. And I think, for one, just like acknowledging that there are going to be times where your execution is not perfect. I think that's essential. And I think if you act like anything but perfection is largely tied to your skill as an athlete, your value as an athlete, I think you're going to end up messing up even worse and more frequently. I think going in and like being very honest that like, okay, here are the things that are going to happen. You're going to overeat. You're going to misreport food. You're going to fail to plan, and your schedule's going to get thrown off, and you're going to be without a meal, and you're going to have to make a decision kind of on the fly. Like, okay, I'm going out to eat now. What am I going to get? What is something reasonable? You're going to have low motivation. You're going to have some kind of discrepancy in discipline at certain times. You're going to be stressed. You're going to be stressed. And these things are going to happen all under the guise that like hunger signaling is not restored. It is not back to baseline. And that's where like you really have to go into this with realistic expectations around what metrics you're going to track to determine success, to determine performance. And for me, like, I like to build in ways for clients to succeed post-show. I like to build in ways for them to intentionally to plan, to have days where they do go out to eat, where they're forced to track foods that are not prepared. I think this is a really important practice, exercise for them to do outside of the gym, obviously, for them to really consider, okay, like real life might require you deviate from a prepped meal. I mean, like, sure, you're dialed in for your pro debut or for a national show. I want it to be as tightly controlled as possible, as accurate as possible. But real life does encompass modifications. It will include states that are suboptimal. And I think that's really like the root of it is when we get into what is a highly skilled athlete. I think it comes down to an athlete who's able to stay the course and not deviate too far off, even in those states that are suboptimal. So in the case where you see that, let's just say like, okay, the rate of gain is a little bit higher, it's, occurring at a rate that let's say you're not expecting, you're not used to. Okay, well, this might be a point where instead of like leaning into, hey, I need to do a mini cut, because at that point it's like a mini cut, you're not in a state for that even to be productive. That ultimately is just going to further dysregulate you. If that's the case, okay, well, it might seem like the best alternative is to compensate for a faster rate of gain. But in reality, it might make more sense just to stabilize, just to settle, just to find that continuity, particularly if adherence is not locked in. Sometimes the best thing you can do is not act, is not make a change, not pivot in the opposite direction. I mean, ultimately in this state, you really have to consider, is what you're doing, is it going to potentially affect adherence? Maybe not now, maybe not today, but doing 3, 4, 5 more days of increased rigidity in your program, if that is going to then result in potentially lower adherence one day, potentially a very large overage, it's not worth it. Like, knowing when to fold, knowing when to take a step back and be like, you know what, this is the best I can do. Maybe it's occurring at a faster rate than I initially wanted, but it's not worth taking 2 steps back just to feel like, okay, I did the thing one day. I worked a little bit harder one day. And I think this is a skill that honestly is going to come from experience, trial and error, messing up, auditing those mess ups, and accepting that, like, mess ups and learning from those mistakes, that is an essential part of this period of the journey. Hate that I'm using that word, of being a physique athlete.